Alright, how's it going, guys? It's been quite a while since I've streamed any sort of content to YouTube lately. Just been lacking a little bit on the creative side of things, but that doesn't matter too much because we're going to go ahead and get right into it. So, a while ago I was browsing Reddit, as I do, as anyone does it, that's how Reddit works, and I came across an interesting little concept that I thought I'd like to play with, called O2 Digest. Now, I think this is not a thought. This is actually just known. This was originally created as a meme on the OS community subreddit, and I looked at the comments and noted that quite a number of people just sort of thought to themselves, or at least thought aloud, or just put a comment. I would read that. I mean, I'd probably read it too, especially if it was well designed. I'm a sucker for good design. And I thought, hey, I've been doing a lot more 2D stuff. I've been doing a lot of print work lately. Maybe I should kind of put my chops to the test and see what I can do with this and where I can take it. So with that being said, I'm really just going to get right into it and kind of first break down what I don't like about this and what I want to improve with it and why. Now, to sum up and say I don't like anything about it really wouldn't be the most correct way to say it, because this isn't like, man, this looks bad and I don't like it. To be more specific, it feels as though it's kind of lacking character, and it feels as though it is very student-esque work, as if someone who didn't have too many references put together something that they thought might be a tablet you might see at a store. That's not inherently bad, but there's no brand coherency. This is the closest color to any color in the Osu color palette, at least as far as the web goes. And I don't, the font doesn't look bad, but I don't think the font fits here. And then a big part of what really threw me for a loop when I downloaded the file originally was it was made in Photoshop. Now, I think a lot of more indie and hobbyist content creators tend to kind of stick to Photoshop because that's probably the easiest to get a hold of, and there's probably the most tutorials out there for it. But Photoshop doesn't lend itself well to doing this sort of print work, or this sort of type of typographical work and this sort of layout work, typographical work, so I understand. What I mean by that is in Photoshop, you don't get the benefit of vectors most of the time, and text lends itself very well to that. So it's a lot easier to handle text and layout in Illustrator, or in any vector program for that matter. It could be Inkscape, it could be Illustrator, it could be insert name of vector program here. That doesn't matter too much, but that was the first thing that threw me for a loop here. And after reaching out to the original creator of this and wanting to try and strike up a partnership and kind of work with this person, and we've definitely been doing that. We've been kind of going back and forth with me sharing my updated concepts and then some changes he might recommend. The biggest pitfall to sort of working with something like this on a group project in general is to make sure everybody's on the same pipeline. So I guess I'm going to start with the pipeline stuff. And in this scenario, I'm certainly going to want to use Illustrator because this is a concept. Now, if I was going to do artwork for this, and it was going to be something that I would like draw or paint, I would go to Photoshop. I would go to Photoshop for the raster artwork and kind of these pretty images. Now, if I wanted to do like a piece of vector artwork, like what you might see in terms of a poster, or things that are, very halftone-esque, that screen pop or screen comic book that aren't more hand-drawn, but that look kind of more computer-generated maybe. I would want to do something like that in Illustrator to take advantage of vectors, but if I was going to do other artwork, I might use Photoshop, and I would just do that section in Photoshop. I would decide, I want, if we turn on my guides layer here, I might decide that this section right here, this is going to be the cover page, or at least where the artwork for the cover page is. And I would then go about building that size in Photoshop and then re-import that Photoshop document into Illustrator, or whatever my package of choice was. In this case, it is Illustrator. Now, I say this is a concept for a magazine, which means I'm going to want to assumedly have more than one page. And at that rate, I would actually put these together in Adobe InDesign, or the open source equivalent if there is one. Because again, with something like Photoshop, and even in this case Illustrator, in Illustrator I can have multiple artboards. I can have really as many artboards as I want. but I don't get the opportunity to apply spreads to these. And let's say that like pages 3, 4, and 5 are the same type of page, so they get the same stock template. I wouldn't get to do that in Illustrator. I'd have to copy everything over and then move to the next page. I know what you're thinking. Oh man, that's not the biggest deal in the world. You copy it and then you go paste it in the exact same spot it would be on the other page. Well, yeah. I mean, I would do that. And no, that's not a tremendous amount of work. In a 7-page publication, that's not the worst thing. In a 10-page, not much worse. In a 20-page, and it's really starting to add up. And any more than that, we'll probably just be more to deal with. In something like InDesign, if I already have my concept fleshed out, I can build a template in InDesign and then specify which pages are going to be a part of which spread, and then say, all right, I want to build a page B type. And it would go in and bring in all the design elements and go and bring in everything else. So, in terms of pipeline for a concept, for some print or for stationery work, I would probably definitely want to use Illustrator because I'm really trying to just do a single page concept and there's not a lot of layout going on here, not a lot of complex layout. So I can kind of take advantage of my vector-esque workflow, but I don't have to worry too much about a giant template with a bunch of different page types or even a few different page types because I'm not making those yet. I might make the concept for those pages as different artboards and experiment from there, and then I would take it probably into InDesign and start filling in the content. But in a scenario where I'm trying to design a magazine, I certainly wouldn't want to use Photoshop just because it doesn't have the best workflow with vectors. Now, with that being said, it doesn't mean that I'm particularly correct on this matter. I would imagine there are more than a handful of designers who put together their magazines in Photoshop. I've seen a few YouTube tutorials where people do that. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm not harping on that as if that's a thing you should avoid doing. But I think, when I think to my pipeline and what might make most sense for something you want to print, it might be easiest to do it in something like Adobe Illustrator or any vector package, so you can take full advantage of scaling and maintaining your full resolution. For example, I guess, actually, I don't need to do fancy. Let's say that I want to export it, and so I choose, you guys cannot, what the heck. Okay. You guys can't see the drop down. That's lame. Having a little trouble with my streaming setup right now, using a laptop with 2 GPUs, and I can't just window capture. It's being done. Well, let's see here. Well, let's say that I want to, can't even okay, that's a little frustrating. That's funny. I'm gonna add, give me 1 second. Aha. Okay, so let's say that I clicked File, and again, you guys aren't going to be able to see this, but let's say that I clicked File, and then I clicked Export, and then Export for Screens. I can choose my location, all that jazz, choose my format, but what makes this interesting, let's say that I'm ready to export this for good. We're going to do artboard. I can add a scale, and I've decided I want to print this on a poster. That means I'm going to want to have a document probably a fair bit bigger than the one I have now. If I have the same aspect ratio and I just know that my poster is 4 times the size of my magazine, then I can easily click my 4x button, and I'm not going to lose any resolution on any text, on any design elements, on any vector piece. I would lose some resolution on the photo or any sort of raster artwork that goes there, which is fine. I would just find a better photo if I knew I was going to put it on a poster board. But I think that in a scenario where I know that I might want to scale up or scale down, it might be easier to use vectors. Again, not everybody's going to be in that scenario, and there's no right or wrong. But one crucial aspect that you definitely want to get right if you're working on a team is to have a very solid pipeline and make sure that everybody's on the same page. Again, going back to my experience with working with this person, I have to go and take my design and convert it into a PSD type file, so he might be able to change some colors and toy with things, only to send it back and for me to re-import those changes, rather than me sending him an Illustrator file that he could edit, or a PDF or an SVG or whatever he edits it and sends it back to me. It's a little unfortunate in how difficult, not difficult, but rather it's not unfortunate. Rather, what I want to say is that it is a little less efficient, plain and simple. It's just a little less efficient simply because we have to spend more time transferring, editing our files in such a way that allows us to incorporate the other's changes. That's what I mean by efficient. And again, that can be solved quite easily by just being on the same page. Now, with that, being on the same page would just be communicating, kind of having a vision of where both or all parties want to go, make sure everybody's on the same software, and try to make sure that everybody is just working together. Pipeline's not super hard, but pipeline is super important to manage. Whether you're a single-man team or a multi-man team or whatever, you want to make sure that all parties involved are on the same page so you can work as efficiently as possible. Now, with that in mind, let's go ahead and remove that. That's funny. Okay. Now I'm going to have to come in at window capture. Oh, cool. That's what. Yeah, I'm having a lot of trouble with the display capture mode. So I actually need to have like all of my little widgets for Illustrator added separately in StreamYard's OBS rather than here. That's just a little technical issue because this is a spur of the moment sort of stream. Nothing too fancy, but we're gonna stop the ranting and we're gonna kind of move on. All right, so here in the bottom right corner are my layers. You'll see there are a lot of them. If you're working on anything, you want to always try and work in layers. That is one awesome thing that this particular artist / designer, whatever you want to call them, that this content creator made with their original Photoshop file. They did have everything split off into layers. I think Photoshop might actually make you do that by default, like every time you put down new text or new image or whatever, it puts down a new layer. And he took the liberty as well and went ahead and grouped everything together. So he put all the text in one text group and then that on its own layer, and so on and so forth. That is very important pipeline-wise because it just makes it easy to go in and say, I just want to touch this, this text, and then you don't have to worry about necessarily selecting stuff. Okay, so now that I've gone over pipeline a little bit, here are the things that I'm not a big fan of. Again, layout just feels quite stale, and it doesn't feel like it has a lot of character. It's not super interesting to look at, although I will give kind of brownie points here for having everything but the face blur and having the text kind of wrap around the face. This is the important part of the cover, and that's made very aware. A, the focus. B, how the text is laid out. Now this text is huge, and the font is not bad, but I do have to question why. Why this font? Is this the font that the website uses? Is this in line with a particular skin? Or is this just what this artist, designer, content creator wanted? All three of those are fine answers. None of them are particularly wrong. It all really depends on what your brand ethos is and your justification for doing those. And justification can be as simple as, I like the way that looks. But you have to take into account how everything looks together. And that's where it kind of starts to fall apart. These colors don't make too much sense. They just seem to be high contrast colors that are easy to look, but they don't work well together. I wouldn't put these in a color palette and think that those are consistent colors that mesh well. They kind of stand out towards one another, and sure, it makes them easy to read, but it also kind of takes away from the aesthetic value. It looks like there's drop shadow on the text, which that's not the worst thing in the world. Personally, I'm not a fan because I don't feel like that fits in with what the website looks like, and I don't feel that that is completely representative of what OS, what the aesthetic of OS really is, at least as far as the vanilla aesthetic that, the original designer put forth in both the website and the skin. And to each their own. Maybe this content creator doesn't really care for that, and I can't knock that. If that's what they want, then that's what they want, and I may not agree, and I can just change it and move forward. Neither of us are tied to each other or have some particular reason that we have to listen to what the other says. It's just a matter of, again, going back to pipeline, what do we want to get out of it? What is our brand justification as far as, like, we should be using these colors, these texts, because that represents the brand, those sorts of things. So color out of the way. The other thing, this headline, again, it kind of works together with these giant blocks of thick, fat text of very clashy colors to just kind of scream, this is a student who tried making their first cover based on a few covers they remember seeing when they were standing in line at the store. And maybe they looked at a few references, but I'd be hard-pressed to believe that they took them to heart, just because I can't think of anything that has this very busy, very slap you in the face kind of look at my text and read it. Now, again, props for contrast, because it is very readable in most places. Indifferent towards the drop shadow. These little bits of text are quite difficult to read if the drop shadow helps, but there's probably a better way, whether that's making the font bolder or putting it in black, or choosing a better photo. Now, photo. I don't like the photo. I don't have a different photo. When I was working on my context for this, that was my biggest complaint to myself, and that I talked with, the content creator for this piece. I don't have another photo to put here. This isn't a good photo to put here. It's not a good photo because the color's kind of whack. The exposure's whack. It's super noisy, and it's just blurry. It's too blurry. Overall, it's not that good of a photo, which is a little frustrating. I tried to fix it up, but when you're working with lower resolution images, there's just not so much you can do. And resolution doesn't just refer to, the actual size of the image, like 1920 by 1080 or 640 by 40 or whatever. Low resolution can also refer to how much data does this image store. This is a JPEG image, which means it's compressed. So it doesn't have metadata that says, here's the exposure of the image, or here's the brightness for the individual channels, or it's missing a lot of data like transparency, like exposure, like white balance, like color temperature even, like vibrance. It's missing all the integrated color curves, like everything that a more serious designer would want in their photos, because they might go take them themselves or work with a photographer who's shooting them raw. They would have a pipeline that would allow them to tweak the photo 1,000 different ways before they compressed it and sent it out to the client or to the designer for the magazine. That's no one's fault. I mean, when you're just an internet person kind of working on a concept as a meme, and then want to make it serious, you have to go source this content. And we don't have the luxury of sourcing incredibly high quality content, so it would kind of be a, if you can't find it, you gotta make it yourself. And it can be difficult to kind of build up the skills, to find someone with the skills, or to even get the equipment that's going to let you take those things. It's not expensive, and you can't find it, but you do have to work a little more for it. And for someone who may not have those sorts of skills or that sort of training, that's fair. That's totally fair. No harm, no foul. There's nothing wrong with trying because you want to do it and because you want to learn. It's not like everything has to be perfect and done a certain way. I just think you want to do something in such a way that if you're working in a group, allows others to contribute well, but also that just gives a high quality result. I wouldn't consider this a high quality result. But again, there's nothing wrong with that. So that's kind of my critiques with it. Colors not working together, the layout slaps you in the face and is busy. This photo stinks. I don't have a solution for that. And there's no consistent design, and it doesn't really feel like it's pertaining to OS. The only reason I know it's pertaining to OS is because it says OS Digest. OS Digest is the news and achievements of the game OS created by Dean Herbert Pepe. I know that this is OS because it says it, but I can't tell from the colors. The picture I can reasonably assume, but if I didn't have If I didn't have all of these giant blocks of text, I wouldn't know that that's an OSU player. I also wouldn't know that this is an OSU player. Those aren't critiques that need to change, though, because you aren't always going to tell what something is unless you're super deep in the community. That's kind of what these are there for. You know, the picture augments this. We're showing the dude who got the first full combo, and we're showing Fiery Rage. I don't know why we're showing Fiery Rage. That's probably just the picture we have. You know, those are the things we're showing. The pictures are augmenting. Now the cover, I would be a little more stringent on because this cover is not super relevant. And again, the thing about design is it's additive. I think in general, I mean, design is everything. But in particular, in this context, we want our design of our magazine to be additive. We want everything to contribute to a singular brand that is recognizable and that highlights the content we're trying to let others consume in a very positive and usually aesthetically pleasing way. There's both form and there's both function. Now, the function of this cover is decent. I mean, it reads somewhat easy because it's easy to read, but the form is really where we need to work. So, with those criticisms out of the way, I'm going to turn off the original, and we're actually going to go ahead and turn all of these on and see a little bit of how I try to improve things. So, I wanted to incorporate more of the colors from the website. In fact, if we kind of pull up the website, and unfortunately I'm not going to be able to pull these up side by side. We turn on Firefox. All of the colors that I use, I got from this website. I actually have this add-in, which is, unfortunately, you're not going to be able to see it too well because it's just not working. Well, the add-in is working, the add-on is working, the window capture is not. Basically, it lets me go and just kind of like color pick everything. So like I can click on this bar, and then it's going to pull this color. Or this little bar down here, which I actually did. Both of those are colors in the palette. So if you go back into my Illustrator, there's another window that I would like to open and show you guys. One important aspect of trying to build a consistent brand is to also build color palettes. So we're not having to go back and consistently look or even necessarily write down those colors on paper. We can just use a color palette in a library that's going to sync up everywhere. I kind of advocate for Adobe Creative Cloud for this reason, simply because it allows me to work anywhere and just have all of my palettes and libraries saved. But I get that not everybody wants to pay for that. But I can also export these as Adobe Illustrator templates or Adobe Swatch Exchange might be the file format. There's a lot of programs that can read that. That's basically me just being able to export the color palettes without having to have someone else. If I can find where my color palettes are. Where are my color palettes at? There's the color palette window. I have that, but for whatever reason, it will not actually show you guys the individual color palettes, which is a bit of a bummer. Guess those are all going to be the same. If that's the case, that's kind of lame. Well, that's unfortunate. I guess I'm just not going to get it today. I'll figure it out later. You know, again, this is a pretty impromptu stream. This is me just kind of getting ranty, doing a little breakdown of creative work, and hopefully there's some philosophy you can learn or just something interesting to see to occupy time. Anyways, let's get back to this. So again, I built 3 different color palettes. 2 of them are slightly different. One of them is just a little bit alty, and then there's a third color palette that is what I consider to be a very much like alternate color palette. I don't even think I use any colors from there on here because I don't think that they fit well, but those were just random miscellaneous colors that I did pull from the website to try and make things a little more vibrant. So getting in here, we are sticking true to the brand of the actual website itself, and we're using, so let me select it, highlight it. We're using the XO2 font. You can get that from Google Fonts. It's actually quite a pretty font, and there are a few other recommendations of fonts that go well with. So one good pairing, again, kind of that Google font gives. If we go into our main content, and that's XO, also XO. Why am I using that? I thought I was using that font. Maybe I'm not, because I didn't like the pairing. Hang on. That font is Roboto. Roboto Slab, actually. I thought that I had that font somewhere on here, so I guess I'm not using it. But again, Roboto Slab font is actually not used in the Yoast website, but I thought that it looked good with the current font. And again, that's also a recommendation by Google. I didn't just find Roboto Slab and think, oh, that looks good with XO. No, that was a pairing that Google Fonts recommended. I thought it looked pretty alright, but when I put it in here, I guess I just wasn't a fan, maybe. I don't remember. I honestly actually don't remember why I changed it. Other things that I have changed since one of the revisions of the photo, I tried to color correct a little bit and make the exposure more accurate. I tend to oversaturate colors a little bit, which is pretty evident here, and blur is also just a little too harsh. I thought that I feathered it, but I didn't. I tried a few other ways of like doing a magic wand selection in Photoshop to just kind of outline the face and then blur, but the edges of the hair are so blurry to begin with that it just ruins it. Hair is one thing that is incredibly difficult to get right, and unless I would have gone through pixel by pixel over the entire hair, there wasn't a way that I was going to get a good enough selection to allow me to really kind of blur this well. So I will say the blur on the earlier photo is quite a bit better, but I think the exposure is a fair bit more even, and the colors tend to pop a little bit more, which works well enough, considering this is more of a pop-esque magazine. But that might be something that I go and tone down, because I'm kind of conflicted on that. Other little elements I'm conflicted of, the white font. The black font doesn't do it any justice by any metric. In fact, if we went in and did that, sorry fam, that's not going to work. But that doesn't really work either. I don't think there's enough contrast. So that's kind of why I chopped a lot of the contrast issues up to the photo, especially over here. There's not a better place to put this. I tried to unclutter it, make a little more of the photo viewable, but there's no good place to lay out anything over this photo. That's why I think this photo just kind of sucks. It's too bright to put white font over, but it's not quite bright enough for me to put black font over it. So look at this area looks alright, but then it pops quite a bit less, and that's just unfortunate. And then over here with the page numbers, I wanted those to be different colors to get them to stick out with the main block of text that they are under. But these colors are a bit overused. Both here on this sidebar, here on this part of the sidebar, this divider, and this top bar. Those are classic rose colors, and maybe that's fine. Maybe I want to go with a different color. Still not sure. That's why it is a concept. Other little changes here, the price, that actually I think that doesn't need to exist. It's not like this is a thing that would ever be sold. The only time anyone would ever buy this is to buy a print copy at cost because they wanted to hold it in their hand and then print it. That's a different story. But as far as this goes, things I do like, I do like the Yoast logo. Didn't go find that. I just put Yoast inside of a circle. No originality there. That's fine though, because I want to try and stick to making this look a little more, quote, official, unquote. By no metric is this official. I haven't talked to anyone other than one person in the community on this design. I have no permission from anyone, as far as making things official goes. So yeah, OSU is open source, and I can go do this and be independent from most. But I do just want to make that clear. This isn't official. I want to make it look official because I think it totally could be. That'd be totally rad, but it's not at the same time. So just understand that this is not like official heavy, one I just made. This is just a couple of guys. And in this instance, this is my rendition of the concept, my improvements, to make it look a little more official. So other things that I also wanted to go and add, I wanted to get in all the triangles that you see on the website. I think that's a pretty interesting little design element. It makes things, well, it just looks cool. So if we go back over here, and then, come on, let's look at these. The triangles break up the space. It adds a little more interest, and it doesn't make things feel quite so empty. It gives it some texture, and it implies a little bit of motion as well. I think it also gives it a little bit of depth the more that I look at it. And again, this is me reading into things as someone who's gone to university to study a little bit of this. But it gives it a little more motion, and it just makes it look interesting. At the end of the day, everything adds together to make a more interesting composition, and that's what I'm trying to replicate here with these circles. Although I wanted to add my own flair to it, and I couldn't get the white to be quite correct. It's a weird statement to say, because you would just think that white is white, and you choose a color white and it'll fit. I don't know. I couldn't quite find the right kind of white to stain with this kind of purple. But if we go back in here and just click, this is literally like I copy pasted a bunch of triangles as gradients. Turn down the opacity and then just group it. So each one of these triangles has its own gradient that I had to go through and make, which I guess I can't show you because the window's not there. But really, basically all I did was, create the shape, create a random size, create a few variations. So I think there are like 5 or 6 variations. I then went and, went from solid color to gradient, and then just put some transparency on it. So it's not super intense. I changed the opacity on these as a whole, but then on an individual level, some of them have, I lied. I actually did the opposite. Each of these has a varying amount of opacity, and then they get grouped, and then they get clipped. But when they get clipped and put into another group, I do give them a different blend mode. Again, you can't see it, but I have it set to color dodge here, but I could set it to darken, or I could set it to lighten, or whatever. I thought color dodge looked the most interesting, but that's an area that I want to play around some more when you get it to work. And I basically did the same thing over here. And when I say basically, I mean I straight up did. I actually pulled a lot of these similar triangles, but then I modified the shape, moved them around, added in some circles, and then just gave it a, let me select it, and then just gave it a different screen mode. So, I just put it to light instead. But I could put it to color, and I did at first, but I wasn't a fan of the way that it looked. I thought that it was just too much. It really hits you in the face and stands out just a little too much. So I went with lighten. I felt that it fit better, but I don't know. A lot of those are open to interpretation. This kind of design language I would consider to be something like inspired by the two-tone industrial design of the Xbox, but also it wants to take some modern elements from like iOS 7 era frosted glass, or even just modern iOS 7. That doesn't mean that's what the design language is. There isn't really a centralized design language other than me taking points of inspiration from other kinds of designs. Two-tone is something that really, really looks interesting to me just in general, and I really wanted to experiment that with here. On that note, with these little dividers, because these this top bar and this sidebar, those are the base colors, are just rectangles with that color. But the dividers are just a little bit more interesting. So if we unlock the top inner element, it's actually 2 dividers, one of a solid color and then one gradient with a lower transparency over it. I'm not sure how I feel about that at the moment. I don't dislike it. I don't exactly like it. I mean, it kind of pops more like this, but maybe it feels better the other way. I might remove them because I think that this gradient gives it a little too much depth that makes it feel a little more like a 90s-esque sort of aqua color language. Like, if you think back to the old style buttons in Mac OS, or I guess it would have been Mac OS X, you know, those bubble looking ones, that's kind of what this reminds me of. It just feels a little out of date. Again, my driving inspiration for this was to try and get it to look like the website, but then to also inspire my own sort of little design tricks here and there, which I will say, again, this is a design that I fully created on my own that was inspired by the earlier design of the concept for OS Digest. And I thought, hey, I'm going to pull these colors from the website, I'm going to want to use the font, and let's try and change the layout. And so this represents a solid like 4 or 5 hours of work. There's still a lot that I want to change, particularly this back photo. I want to do something with the text, and I don't know what I want to do with the text, but I know that I can't see it well enough, and that poses a problem. Same for this text. The contrast might technically be compliant with the W3C the accessibility check for contrast. It might technically be compliant with that, but that doesn't mean that it's good, or that it looks good, or that it's easy to read. That's just the difference in value between the black text and this color might be well enough for a screen reader to think you can, quote, read it, unquote, but I don't think that it stands out. I don't know that that's necessary. Sure, I'd like a tagline, and maybe it could fit there, and maybe it could fit there, and maybe that is the best place. More experimentation is certainly necessary with this, and I would certainly be quite excited to really get this to a point where I'd be a lot more comfortable pushing this out as a legitimate sort of community effort. And I definitely have more work to do with regards to fixing those problems I mentioned, but also to flesh out the rest of the concept. Because remember, this is just a cover. I would still want to go in and build the additional pages and do layout for those, and then it would also have to go and be filled with content, which is the other part of this effort that will not be discussed in this video, but as with anything you do, there's a whole complete scope. I didn't go and create this with that scope in mind. I just thought it'd be fun to do this, to beef it up, and to apply my skills to it. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and leave it off. This video is a little rant here, a little more tangents here and there, but hopefully you guys were able to kind of get a sense of why I did the things that I did with this design and why I changed it in that way, and what sort of inspired those changes. In the future, if any of you guys are looking for more specific Illustrator tutorials, or would love to see a different redesign, or just need help with any sort of Illustrator stuff, or typography, or general layout and stationery work, definitely feel free to message me on YouTube. I don't know if I have my other social media or my email open or whatever, but if there's any other knowledge that you guys would like to see, I certainly would love to be able to provide it as I try to get more on a regular streaming / schedule. So with that, thank you guys again for tuning in, and I will see you guys in the next one.